All right, what's up, YouTube? It's kind of late. All right, it's 3:30 in the morning. Actually, I'm just getting home. Sometimes I get home this late. I get home late a lot, and sometimes I want to do boxing videos, but I go straight to bed. And I try to do them in the morning. Still don't have that same energy. Some of the things that I was thinking about, I forgot because I went to bed. And there's nights like this where I'm like, as soon as I get home, I want to do the video because I want everything while everything is fresh in my head. I want to do it while it's fresh in my head. All right. New subscribers, welcome. Okay. Uh, or new viewers, welcome. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Old subscribers, trying to get back to doing videos as much as I did back in 2013, 2014. Okay. I slowed down dramatically, but I'm not getting paid for this. I'm not really getting anything out of doing this. It's all because it's all for fun. All right, and I think I need to be here. All right, I think I need to be here on the YouTube thing. Um, you know. Um, so anyway, Danny Garcia. I wanted to do this video because Danny just never really seems to get that love that a lot of top fighters are getting. He's always getting criticized for something. And there's plenty of reasons, and I'm going to break it down in this video. All in this video, I'm going to break down why people don't respect Danny Garcia as much as he should get respected. Okay, not only do the fans not really respect him, the journalists, everyone has, all the critics, but the fighters don't neither. And when I say that he's kind of like Chavez Jr., I don't mean it in the sense of skills or anything like that. I'm just talking about a lot of fighters look at Danny and want to fight him. They feel that they can beat him, and he has a bigger name than him, and he's a champion. And a lot of fighters want to fight that guy, because they don't feel like he's that good, and when it comes to other fighters, other champions at 140 or at 147, they're not so eager to fight the other champions in each division, not as eager as they are with Danny Garcia. When it comes to Danny, everybody wants a piece of Danny. Everyone always calls him out. And I'm going to explain why in this video, at least in my opinion, okay? Now, let me start off with me personally. I think Danny Garcia is a very good fighter. I think he's a top fighter at 147. I think he was the best fighter at 140 after Tim Bradley. I think he's done the most accomplished fighter at 140 since Timothy Bradley went up to 147. Okay. Now at 147, I believe his only fight was with Guerrero. Paulie Malignaggi, I believe, was his first fight at 147. A lot of people like to move up and fight Paulie Malignaggi, all right? But his first real fight was against Robert Guerrero. He dominated Paulie, and he fought Robert Guerrero. Looked good against Robert Guerrero, I think. I think it was a very competitive fight. I think it was a close fight, but I think he deserved the win. And Danny's a good fighter. I think people don't give him credit. Some things has happened throughout his career, which I'm going to explain in a minute. But I think he's a really solid boxer. He's a really solid boxer. The thing about Danny is he doesn't really have his fan base is not geared toward a specific group of people. Okay, Danny Garcia is a Puerto Rican fighter from Philly. His Spanish is a bit rusty. I believe he knows some Spanish, but he doesn't speak Spanish. Okay, he grew up in Philly. He's more in tune with the hip hop community. Okay, people that he look up to, are other Philly fighters. You know what I'm saying? He is a Philly fighter. They try to market him as the next Puerto Rican star at one point and let him fight out in Puerto Rico when he fought Herrera. And the fight was probably the biggest mistake in his career thus far. All right. Bad matchmaking, in my opinion. All right. And I said this back when I did a prediction video for that fight on how I don't think that was a good matchup for Danny Garcia, because a lot of people viewed it as a tune-up fight, and I thought stylistically that Herrera was a very bad matchup for Danny. And you know, most people think that Herrera won that fight. But Danny doesn't have a specific group of people. You know, he's Puerto Rican, but they don't view him as the next Cotto or the Tito, or they don't even look at him as Felix Verdejo. They don't back him like they do Felix Verdejo right now. You know what I'm saying? So he has like a mixed group of followers and fans, you know. I don't think people give him enough credit for his chin. I think he has one of the best chins in boxing. All right. I don't think he's ever been dropped in his career. And, you know, even when he's losing some rounds and he's getting, you know, I think the most we've seen him getting beaten was by Lamont Peterson, those few rounds where Lamont Peterson was really putting it on Danny. And it almost looked at some points like Danny's was really hurt and was backed against the ropes. But he never went down. He kept fighting. You know, I don't think people give him credit. He's a good boxer, but he can mix it up with you. He can engage with you. He could go to war with you. And people don't really give him credit for that. You know, and his resume, he has a great resume. I mean, he just doesn't get the credit. And I'm going to break it down on why I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves, okay? He's a still undefeated fighter. He does everything well, all right? But people like to say the reason why I think people don't like him as well is because he does nothing special. There's nothing fancy about him, okay? You look at him and you look at his fights, and the majority of the fighters he fought were very good fighters. Yet, he didn't dominate a lot of these fighters that he's fought. Okay, and I'm going to go down, you know, I pulled up BoxRec, and I'm going to go down his resume, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on each fight, quick thoughts on each fight. And it's going to bring, you know, it's going to kind of further explain why people feel this way about Danny Garcia, why people just don't respect him. You know, at 147, you know, I think there's fighters that he can beat that most people wouldn't probably expect him to beat, you know, and I think there's fighters that he can't beat, but they seem to match him up very well. I think outside of Herrera, I think he's been matched up very, very well throughout his career. I mean, fighting good fighters, but at the same time, fighters that his styles fits well. I think Matisse was his biggest win at the time. He was a huge underdog at that time. And, well, I don't know how huge of an underdog he was, but I remember him being an underdog. I mean, that was the very first video I've done on YouTube was Danny Garcia and Lucas Matisse, and I did that prediction. I remember the backlash I got for picking Danny to win that fight. It's just that people don't usually see him winning some of his fights because it's nothing flashy about him. It's nothing like, you know, like when he wins fights, he's usually losing at some point in the fight, and then he comes back and figures out. See, the thing about Danny is that he's a winner at the end of the day. And even when he's looking kind of bad in certain rounds of each fight, he always finds a way to win. And this is why you got to give him credit, all right? So anyway, let's go down. I want to go through BoxRec first. All right, and then I'm going to talk some more, but let's go to BoxRec. I'm going to pull it up here, and I'm going to go through some of the fighters that he's fought over the years. All right, I'm going to start at Kendall Hall. I'm going to start there. All right, this was back in 2011. This is when Danny was still fighting at 140. All right, Kendall Hall. I haven't seen him fight in a long time. But, you know, I remember it being, you know, somewhat competitive. They have it here listed here that it was a split decision win. I remember Danny, you know, I remember watching that fight, And I thought Danny won the fight. I thought it was a clear win. One of the judges picked Kendall to win, or Kendall as the winner. I thought Danny won the fight. I thought Kendall Hall was always a guy that had great power and everything, but he just never really won the big ones. You know what I'm saying? I thought Danny even beat him better than Tim Bradley beat him. I know Kendall had Tim Bradley badly, badly hurt, and I thought Danny did a good job against Kendall Hall. Didn't dominate him, but it was a solid win, like the majority of Danny's wins. You had Eric Morales, the first fight. Now, it's listed here as a unanimous decision. 117, 110, 116, 112, 118, 109. I remember that fight well. And compared to the Kendall Holt fight. And I remember what people were saying. A lot of people thought that Danny had trouble in that fight. I remember some of the earlier rounds that Morales was winning, and he was making Danny look bad. He was making him miss, made him look sloppy a little bit. And people went on to say that Danny didn't look good against Morales. This was the fight where people used to criticize him for. They used to criticize. This is one of the earlier fights that people criticized Danny Garcia for. He's fighting an old Eric Morales. Morales is way past his prime. And Morales had some good rounds against him. A young Danny Garcia, who was undefeated at the time. And people started criticizing him because Morales didn't do so bad against him. Okay? So this is why people criticize Danny for that fight. Then you go up and he fights Amir Khan. And before he hurts Khan is winning the earlier rounds. The first two rounds, Khan is winning clearly. The speed was too much, the combinations. Khan was looking like Amir Khan at his best. And Danny was losing, but Danny hurts him, catch him with a left hook, and he hurts him, he drops him, and he finished Khan off. They stopped the fight. Khan got back up on his feet, but they stopped the fight. And even though the fight ended in the fourth round, people still tend to criticize Danny Garcia because they say, well, Khan has a weak chin, but if it wasn't for his chin being so weak, Danny would have lost that fight because Danny was losing the earlier round. So he gets criticized for that fight, even though it ended in 4 rounds. And to this day, he's still getting criticized for it because he didn't fight a rematch. He didn't give Khan a second chance. And is Khan really deserving of a second chance? You know what I'm saying? I mean, he knocked him out very early in the fight. It's not like the fight went to 8, 9, 10 rounds where Khan was winning every round and then Danny knocks him out. That's not what happened. Danny knocked him out very, very early in the fight. But he gets criticized for the Amir Khan fight all the time. And so many Khan fans and so many people that's not even Khan fans that just dislike Danny Garcia always say, Danny should fight him again, give him another shot because Khan was winning before he got dropped. All right. Then was the Eric Morales rematch. And at this point, no one really cared for this fight. Morales tested positive for PEDs. And Danny knocked him out very early in the fight, 4th round, all right? Knocked him out, all right? So this fight really didn't do anything for him, all right? It didn't really, at the end of the day, Eric Morales was still very, he was still old, way past his prime. No one really cared like that. So let's move on. Zab Judah. So the Zab Judah fight comes, and Danny's doing well. I remember that fight well. He's doing well. Like, did I go to this fight? I can't remember. But he's doing well, and out of nowhere, Zab hurts him, okay? And Zab backs him up. And Zab is looking good. He gives him a couple rounds towards the end of the fight. He's trying to come back. Hurts Danny. He's winning a few rounds. And, Danny finishes off with the win. He finishes off strong. But a lot of people criticize him again because Zab had some success in that fight, And this is Zab after he gets dominated by Amir Khan. Zab has been down, and people thought he was done so many points of his career. But at this point, at this very point, he looked good again. He looked good against Danny for some rounds, and people, Zab even came back and he went for Paulie Malignaggi, and we saw what happened in that fight where Malignaggi pretty much shut him out, except the one round that Malignaggi got knocked down in that could have been a slip. Danny made Zab look good, and this is why people criticize him for that fight. Where Amir Khan went in there and dominated and stopped Zab pretty quickly. Danny went in there, went 12 rounds against him, and Zab had some really good rounds, and Zab also hurt him. So he made a guy that Danny was supposed to dominate look good, okay? Now, let's move along. Lucas Matthysse. This was when Danny really started to get noticed. This is when people finally respected Danny. Like I said, Danny was the underdog for this fight. Lucas Matthysse was a monster. People thought that, he had the highest KOs ratio, one of the highest KO ratios. People thought that this guy cannot be beaten. I believe Lucas Matthysse had knocked out Peterson before this fight. And, everyone wanted to see this fight at this time. Everyone wanted, everybody thought Matthysse was going to beat Danny Garcia. And Danny Garcia beat him. I mean, he dropped him. He won a unanimous decision. This was on the undercard of Mayweather and Canelo, so everyone saw it. One of the highest grossing pay-per-view fights, pay-per-view cards of all time. And I felt like at this very moment, Danny was on top of the world. This is when people even started saying that Danny should fight Floyd Mayweather because he was on the undercard, all right? And this is the fight why I say Danny has one of the best chins in boxing, because Matthysse landed some bombs against Danny. I mean, it didn't even hurt him, at no point in the fight. Never really hurt him, backed him up a couple times, but never really hurt Danny. Danny took some very clean shots from Matthysse, and Matthysse is the one that got dropped in this fight. All right, so Danny looked good. I thought Danny was on top of the world at this point. And his very next fight, Mauricio Herrera. One of the worst decisions that I feel that the matchmakers made, all right? Making this as a stay busy fight. They're trying to build Danny. They send him out to Puerto Rico. He's out there touring. He's building up. The crowd comes out support him, and he lets the crowd down. This is the first time many Puerto Ricans are really checking out this kid. Mauricio Herrera was doing his thing. I thought Mauricio Herrera won this fight clearly, okay? Danny did show signs. He did come back in the fight. But this was Danny's gift win, all right? This is what everyone says Danny gift Garcia. This was the fight here, all right? And you know what? Not for nothing, most of the best fighters, the great ones, the very good ones, the top guys, the top biggest names, all of them had a gift fight at some point in their career. All of them had a gift. All of them had a very competitive fight that could have went to the opponent, but they got the gift win. And Danny got his gift against Herrera, right? I thought Herrera definitely won, without a doubt. I thought it was unanimous. I thought he won by more than a few rounds, okay? I actually considered this a robbery. There's some fights that people consider robberies that I thought was close, could have gone either way. But this fight was a straight-up robbery, in my opinion. And at this point, it's like Danny gained the respect by beating Matthysse, and then his very next fight, he fights Herrera, and people think he loses, and now everybody's back to hating Danny Garcia, So that's how that worked. And then his very next fight, he fights Salka. A guy that's not even ranked. Danny's still holding the title. He's doing the catch weight thing now, and that's another issue. I don't know if the Salka fight was the first fight he had a catch weight. Yes, it was. It was over 140. It was over 140, and it was still, at first, it was a title defense. But they shut that down. All right. And the thing is about Salka is if you're fighting 2 times a year, you fight Herrera, then you fight Rod Salka. You shouldn't be fighting Rod Salkas. You know, Peterson was fighting the other guy too. I can't remember his name, but you fight twice a year, and you're fighting Rod Salka. And my thing is this: if you came off of a devastating loss, like a knockout loss, I understand the Rod Salka fight. Well, any other reason, there was no excuse for this fight. This is probably one of the most hated fights or hated matchups in recent boxing history. Okay, this was such a mismatch. There hasn't been a mismatch anywhere near on the level of this fight here. Nowhere near. I don't think anyone could pull up a fight that was a bigger mismatch in the past several years or whatever. You know, and Danny did what he had to do, went in there, knocked him out in 2 rounds. All right, he almost knocked this guy's head off. This kid never belonged in the ring with him, and people hated Danny Garcia for it. You know, a lot of people criticized him for it. A lot of people wanted the Peterson fight. A lot of people wanted Herrera rematch. A lot of people wanted Matisse rematch. A lot of people wanted all these other fights. Victor Postal was his mandatory. All right, he was ducking Victor Postal. Didn't want to fight him, and people hated this guy at this point. Went straight back to hating him. You know. Then the Lamar Peterson fight happens. All right, PBC. This is the beginning. PBC, and he fights Lamar Peterson. You know, fight that a lot of people wanted. But the problem with this fight was that it was at a catch weight. It was over 140. So these guys, even though it was a unification match, it wasn't a unification match because these guys didn't fight for the title. So, you know, and then now we see the fight, and a lot of people feel that Lamar Peterson won that fight. I remember first viewing, I thought Lamar Peterson won myself. I think second viewing, I think Danny won enough rounds early on to safely secure the fight. You know, I think I remember watching it maybe about, I don't know, maybe like last year or maybe like about 6 months ago. I watched it again. And I thought Danny won the fight. I thought he won, like, you know, even though Peterson was making him look slow and making him miss and making him look bad, Peterson wasn't really doing nothing offensively to win rounds. And Danny was trying to make the fight. You know, he was chasing him around the ring, and Lamont wasn't even really landing anything. He was just making Danny miss. But then when Peterson did put it on Danny, he put it on him bad. He was busting Danny up. Like for 3-4 rounds, he beat Danny up, you know, and he finished strong. Lamont Peterson finished really strong, but he still, it was like, I think, as far as I can remember, I believe it was like 5 rounds where Danny was just being the aggressor, and then Lamont Peterson started to put it on for a couple rounds. And then he took another break where Danny won a couple more rounds, you know, and that's what made it like a 7-5 fight, in my opinion, you know, because Danny still won a couple of rounds later in the fight. But at the very end, Peterson finished off really, really strong. Peterson looked like he was hurting and backing Danny up, you know, and Danny looked like he was in trouble. So people don't respect that win because a lot of people feel that Peterson won that fight. And people feel that Danny got a gift in that fight. Now, I think the fight could have gone either way. Like I said, I picked Danny. I think the fight was debatable, but I picked Danny for the win. But I think the more clearer rounds were by Lamar Peterson. It's just that Danny won more rounds, in my opinion, all right? So people feel that was a gift, all right? And then you got Paulie Malignaggi, all right? Where, you know, first fight at 147, Danny finally decides to move up, no more catch weights. And he destroys Paulie Malignaggi, right? Really wasn't a close fight at no point, all right? Paulie had already been stopped by Sean Porter. He had a couple fights. I believe he had a couple fights out in Italy and stuff, but nobody big. Comes back, fight Danny Garcia. Danny Garcia stops him, all right? Stops him, looks impressive doing it, okay? Not as early as Sean Porter stopped him, but Danny was winning all the rounds pretty much for the most part. You know, he never had any trouble against Paulie Malignaggi. And then the Robert Guerrero fight. You know, Keith Thurman fought Robert Guerrero, beat him. You know, Floyd Mayweather fought Robert Guerrero, beat him in better fashion than Danny Garcia. And, you know, Robert Guerrero came out strong. Robert Guerrero was winning the majority of the earlier rounds, very early in the round, the first half, although it was very, very competitive. But Guerrero slowed down. He couldn't keep the pace going. And Danny started taking over the fight, outboxing him, countering him, hitting him with hard shots. And Guerrero didn't return much, you know. I thought the last round was great. Guerrero showed a lot of heart in that fight, in that last round. But Danny had secured the fight at that point, you know, and Danny looked very skillful. You know, I don't think he won as good as Keith Thurman did or Floyd Mayweather, but he looked good against Guerrero. It's just that Danny never dominates, you know, and now that I broke down all those fights, we see why people criticize him. People criticize him because of the matchmaking, all right? Because of the close fights, the gifts. You know, some people beat Nate Peterson and Herrera won. Then, you know, there's fights like, you know, Eric Morales and, you know, and you know, some of these other fights where, you know, why did he fight Rod Salka? You know, a lot of people criticize him for these things, and there's so many reasons on why people just gonna never respect him. You know, and now that he's at 147, this is the thing. You got guys like Sean Porter calling him out heavy. Sean Porter, outside of Keith Thurman, he's been calling out Danny Garcia. He's been calling out Danny Garcia hard. And the funny thing is, I think Danny Garcia is gonna beat Sean Porter. You know, I think Danny Garcia can beat Sean Porter. I think he matches up well against Sean Porter. You know, I know Sean is strong and everything like that, but Danny's a better boxer, you know, and he punches fairly hard, and I think he's going to do enough to beat Sean Porter. I think he could beat Sean Porter. You know, I think in a rematch, I think he still beats Khan. You know, I think he's going to land a shot that's going to hurt Khan and take him out. You know, I think there's a lot of guys he beats at 147, you know. I don't know if he's going to fight Floyd, you know, in September. I don't know, you know. But Danny Garcia, it seems to be the guy that everybody wants to fight. You know, there's guys that I don't think Danny could beat. You know, I'm not sure if he could beat Kell Brook. You know, I doubt he could beat Kell Brook. You know, Errol Spence, now everybody's bringing up Errol Spence. Not really sure if he could beat Errol Spence. You know, I think he has a better chance of beating Spence than Brook, though. But I think certain guys like Keith Thurman would be a hard fight for Danny. But Danny got a tough chin, and I really don't think any of these guys could stop him. You know, he's pretty tough, and he punches hard. And, you know, he's always going to bring a fight. And he always finds a way to win. And this is why I can't really doubt him because, you know, unless it's a clear win, every fight seems to be pretty close. He always finds a way to make the adjustments to win a fight, you know. The only fight where a fighter actually came back on him was against Zab Judah. All right. So anyway, Danny Garcia is always going to be that guy that people think they can beat. You know, people feel that he's overrated, yet he's still getting wins against good fighters. All right. He's getting the wins. And no matter how much you criticize him, he's still getting the wins. All right. And for the most part, they're fair wins, in my opinion. For the most part. All right. You know, I think what's going to happen with Danny is if he fights Floyd Mayweather this September, I think Floyd is going to really expose him. And I think Floyd is a bad matchup. For the most part, he's gotten some good matchups, but Floyd is a bad, terrible matchup for Danny Garcia. But if anybody has a chance to fight Floyd Mayweather, who's not going to take the fight? Anyone's going to take the fight if they get the shot with Floyd Mayweather. You know, but as far as matchups between the two, it's a bad matchup. Some other guys at 147, Sean Porter is a good matchup. You know, there's so many guys at 147. I can't even name them all, you know. I mean, even if he were to even fight Pacquiao, you know, or Tim Bradley. You know, if he fought Tim Bradley, I don't know who would really win that fight. You know, I think Danny Garcia has a good chance of winning that fight. You know, I'm not sure if I would pick him to win, but, you know, it's not out of the question. Like, Danny has pulled off wins before, you know. Adrian Broner, that's another fight that I think is going to happen real soon. You know, Danny has a good shot at winning that fight, too. You know, he has a good shot at winning most of these fights. and he has a name, and everybody wants to fight him. And you know what? Everyone don't respect him, so everyone wants to be that guy to the fighters. And I'm not even saying the fans. The fighters wants to be that guy to expose him. I think after Floyd fights him, then I think the value is going to go down, you know. And I think everyone is going to be calling him out. Everyone is going to be willing to jump in the ring, especially, they are doing it now, but especially if Floyd fights him, you know. I don't think he can beat Floyd. I think there's very little chance of him beating Floyd Mayweather, you know. I think he has like a 1% chance. He's no way he's going to beat Floyd Mayweather. But Danny can still beat guys, you know. Garcia, Ortiz, and Berto's fighting this weekend. I think Garcia would beat both of those guys. It's a lot of guys I think Garcia could beat at 147. But anyway, long video. I respect Danny overall. I think he's a good fighter. But I can understand why people don't respect him. You know, because he's not dominating. He's got a couple gifts, okay? And people complain about his catch weight. You know, everybody don't really like him. You know, a lot of people don't like him, but he's not really doing anything wrong. You know, I think he's one of the few, not few, but out of the Al Heyman fighters, I think career-wise, outside of Mauricio Herrera, I think they managed him well, all right? They put him against really good fighters that he would look good against, all right? I don't think he's the best, and I think he's going to take a loss sooner or later. I think he's going to take his first loss, especially if he fights Floyd. But, you know, I think he's still a very good fighter, and he's still he's not a pound-for-pound, top 10 pound-for-pound fighter, but he's arguably a top 20. He does have a great resume. He does. There's no denying his resume. There's no denying his resume. His resume is still better than most people at 147. Most of them. He has a better resume than Kell Brook. He has a better resume than Sean Porter, Keith Thurman. He has a better resume. He fought the better fighters. He fought the better fighters. No matter what you say, he fought the better fighters. All right? But I think his time is running out as far as being an undefeated fighter. Because at 147, there are a few guys that I think has a good chance of beating him. All right? So that concludes my video. You guys leave comments. Let me know what you think. And make sure you hit subscribe.